You wrote on page 1 that a president persuading a person to commit perjury would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Or any person who persuades another to, yeah.
Okay. You also said that a president or any person convincing a witness to change testimony would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And on page 2, you said that a president deliberately impairing the integrity or availability of evidence would be an obstruction. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That was Attorney General nominee William Barr on Tuesday confirming a memo he wrote about what he considers to be obstruction of justice. Then last night, a report that describes President Trump doing exactly that. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe on this Friday, January 18th. Joe is off this morning, but we've got Willie and me and a big team to react to this breaking news this morning. MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle is with us. Donnie Deutsch is with us. Former aide to the George W. Bush White House and State Department's Elise Jordan is here. Editor of Commentary Magazine and columnist at the New York Post, John Podhoretz. And NBC News and MSNBC law analyst, editor-in-chief of Lawfare, Benjamin Wittes. So in a moment, we're going to get to the government shutdown now 28 days in and some incredible dynamics between the president and Nancy Pelosi. As Americans worry about their next paycheck, President Trump and the House Speaker are taking their fight to the next level. But first, a major story broke late last night, which some members of Congress say could be the most serious allegations yet about Donald Trump and Russia. BuzzFeed News reports that President Trump directed his then attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about negotiations to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, citing 2 federal law enforcement officials involved in an investigation of the matter. NBC News has not independently confirmed this report. BuzzFeed sources go on to allege that the president and his children, Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr., received regular, detailed updates about the real estate development from Cohen, whom they put in charge of the project, despite Trump's repeated claims to have no business deals with Russia. The 2 sources tell BuzzFeed that Cohen also told the special counsel that after the election, the president personally instructed him to lie by claiming that negotiations ended months earlier than they actually did in order to obscure Donald Trump's involvement. BuzzFeed reports that the special counsel's office learned about Trump's directive for Cohen to lie to Congress through interviews with multiple witnesses from the Trump Organization and internal company emails, text messages, and a cache of other documents. Cohen then acknowledged those instructions during his interviews with that office. It will be fascinating to hear Michael Cohen testify before Congress on February 7th, Willie. Now, NBC News has not, of course, confirmed this reporting, but BuzzFeed is talking about 2 federal law enforcement officials involved in the matter. So many implications here to consider.
Yeah, without question, this is a big one. The special counsel and Michael Cohen both declined to comment on the story. Benjamin Wittes, I want to go to you on this. You tweeted last night that you have a lot of thoughts about it, but you weren't prepared to say them publicly until you gather your thoughts in the morning. So here we are in the morning. We knew that Michael Cohen lied about this deal. He pleaded guilty in November to the special counsel's office to lying to Congress about this deal. What we didn't know, we suspected but didn't know, is that he was directed to do so by the President of the United States. How significant if this is reported out? And the report does say that these 2 federal investigators, law enforcement officials, say, that Mueller has it backed up not just by Michael Cohen, of course, but by emails, texts, and other documents from the special counsel's office.
Yeah, so the story is a very big deal for, I think, for 3 independent reasons, or maybe interrelated reasons. The first is that, as Mika's introduction suggests, this is, if true, an obstruction of justice by anybody's standards, including the relatively restrictive ones laid out in Bill Barr's memo. And so, you know, there's a big debate about the parameters of the how can you apply the obstruction statutes to things like valid presidential power exercises, like firing the FBI director. There is no debate about whether directing somebody to lie under oath is a crime, right? And so the first important element of the story is just that it is a direct allegation of criminality by the president with respect to obstruction of the Russia investigation. The second important element, as you also alluded to, is that the story contains a whole lot of additional detail about the degree of involvement by the president and his family members in the underlying Trump Tower Moscow deal. And so the aggregate suggestion is that this is lying about collusion, right? Which is, you know, that's getting kind of close to the molten core of the investigation subject. The third key element here, and this is, different from other stories, this is attributed to law enforcement sources. And I suspect that probably does not mean that it's a leak from the Mueller investigation, but it is sure likely to be interpreted that way, and that is going to open up a new front for in the fight between the special counsel's office and the president, as it gives the president's forces significant new ammunition to, accuse the Mueller investigation now of leaking.
So Mike Barnicle, Rudy Giuliani did say last night, responding to this BuzzFeed report, quote, "If you believe Cohen, I can get you a great deal on the Brooklyn Bridge." So again, going after Michael Cohen, here's the problem with that defense. The BuzzFeed reports says the special counsel office learned about Trump's directive for Cohen to lie to Congress through interviews, not just with Michael Cohen, but multiple witnesses from the Trump Organization and internal company emails, text messages, and a cache of other documents. Bob Mueller's not taking Michael Cohen at his word. He's conducting an investigation.
And as Ben pointed out, Willie, the BuzzFeed report is attributed to law enforcement sources. This is the first known example we've had of publicly, on the record, Trump being accused of telling someone to lie about something having to do with Russia. And Ben, I would like to ask you to play then and now. The then would be the 3 articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, and the now, the elements of this story. There are an awful lot of similarities between a couple of the articles of impeachment against Nixon and the elements of this story.
So there are. It is also the case that this is, at this stage, one news story, not the developed record by the investigation. But look, I agree with you. If this story is true, it is a very, very serious matter, and it would take this whole story to a different level. And the other thing is that if this story is true, you have to ask the question, what else is true? Because, one of the questions that we've all been struggling with over the past year and a half is how the collusion story relates to the obstruction story, right? And if Mueller believes that the president and his family were intimately involved in the Trump Tower Moscow deal, presumably he's not interested in that in isolation from the larger question of Russian interference in the 2016 election. And so it really does raise the question of what the relationship is between the obstruction components, asking Michael Cohen to lie, the Trump Tower Moscow components, and the other collusion components.
So, as Willie mentioned, President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, told the AP, quote, "If you believe Cohen, I can get you a good all-cash deal on the Brooklyn Bridge." So many different ways to break down that line, given that it's from Giuliani. In late-night social media posts, Democratic members of Congress are seeking answers. House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff wrote this: "The allegation that the President of the United States may have suborned perjury before our committee in an effort to curtail the investigation and cover up his business dealings with Russia is among the most serious to date. We will do what's necessary to find out if it's true." And Senator Chris Murphy of the Foreign Relations Committee wrote, "If Mueller does have multiple sources confirming Trump directed Cohen to lie to Congress, then we need to know this ASAP. Mueller shouldn't end his inquiry, but it's about time for him to show Congress his cards before it's too late to act. John Podhoretz, okay, first of all, how can they act at this point? When Schiff says we'll do what we can to find out if it's true, do they have new powers to actually do that? And what do they mean by acting now? What are the possibilities? And I'll give a third question, and if anyone else on the set has the answer, raise your hand. Is Cohen able to talk about this on February 7th? Podhoretz, go.
Well, I think he may well not, and of course, one of the problems with Congress investigating at the same time that there's an independent counsel is that there's often a traffic jam that happens,
right,
where Congress needs answers, but there's someone is still, testifying. Cohen's already been sentenced, so it may not be as much of a problem as it was, say, in earlier independent counsel investigations. I think what's happened here that really does involve the new Democratic Congress is the Russian collusion story is very complicated, hard to follow, and there is always that question of whether or not collusion is conspiracy and collusion's not a crime and conspiracy is a crime, and what happened, what was in the president's head. None of that matters here. This is a very simple question. Did the president suborn perjury or did he not suborn perjury? And what it's connected to, this is where I sort of slightly disagree with Ben Wittes. I mean, it's almost an academic exercise what the connection was to the Trump Tower, Moscow collusion, Putin, Trump none of that matters. Either he suborned perjury or he didn't. If he suborned perjury, he was going to be impeached by the Democratic Congress without question. I don't know how you prove it, except for this. Remember, one of the key details is Mueller secured the cooperation through, indemnification of Trump's lawyer, Alan Weisselberg. And if Weisselberg is telling Mueller that if there's independent evidence from another Trump lawyer that they were getting all this information and somehow that Trump knew that Cohen shouldn't share it, that's open and shut. I mean, there's no question at that point. And he will be impeached. That's not to say he'll be removed by the Senate, because then you have this political question of whether or not, 17 or 15 Republican senators join the Democrats in removing him from office. But we've taken this. If the BuzzFeed story is correct, we are not only at another level, we are at impeachment.
So so just to be clear, I actually largely agree with that. But I don't think they're quite as severed, the underlying story from the subornation of perjury allegation are quite as severed as John says, not because in principle I disagree with him, but I do think we severed those as a society in the Clinton impeachment matter, where there was a very clear subornation of Monica Lewinsky's perjury, and, a lot of people reacted to that by saying, come on, it's just about sex. In other words, the underlying substance of the matter did matter to the way it was received by the political system, rightly or wrongly. And here, all I'm saying is that bar is pretty cleared because it's not a trivial matter underlying it. It's actually the whole thing that we've been talking about for 2 years.
Mika, I want to respond to your question about is Michael going to get any of this when he testifies in front of Congress. The answer is no. The one thing, obviously, they had to clear this through Mueller before he can go before Congress. And the one ground rule is there is nothing he can answer as it pertains to the Russian investigation. That does not mean that's not going to be must-see TV, and I think a lot of people's heads are going to be spun in many, 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 many circles. Let's just remember a few things. This is one nugget. One nugget. Let's think about 70 hours of Michael speaking. Let's think about the dozens of hours of Hope Hicks, and on and on and on and on. And none of these people are going to be lying to Bob Mueller to save their own hide. So it is going to be stunning, this level of lying, this level of obstruction. Speaking of obstruction, it's only a day later. I don't want to leave the story because of all the things that Trump has done. It is one of the most heinous. 2 days ago when Trump went on TV and threatened Michael Cohen's father-in-law. That is obstruction. I'll tell you why it's obstruction, because I was on the phone with Michael. And Michael's first reaction was, I'm not testifying. I can't do this. They're going after my family, my innocent father-in-law. So if that's not obstruction, and he will testify. But that is the level that Donald Trump would go through. So the fact that he told Trump to lie to Congress about the tower, there is nothing he wouldn't do. And you saw it on display when he went after his father-in-law. So this is the tip of the iceberg for a president that is going down hard.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.